It's Football at 4. John McMullen on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. It's something that we've discussed before. I'd like to bring the question back up, John, because after seeing 1 week of football, some people would say, well, you play at Clemson or you play in the Big 10 or the Big 12, bigger stuff, it wouldn't even make sense to go play in the XFL. But did you see enough that if you were a quarterback that was a freshman, say, you know what? I'd like to go play pro. I'd like to make a little bit of money for the couple of years. You see enough on Saturday and Sunday to suggest that maybe some players, and it doesn't just have to be a quarterback, they're just the highest profile guys that might gain interest for the league, that some might start doing it.
You can never say never. I would say very few. There might be a hardship case where you absolutely need the money for your family. That could happen. But to me, that would be very few and far between. And,
they're getting paid anyway.
Football, well, some might say that. But some don't say they're paid enough. Either way, under the table, over the table, the value of playing at Alabama or Clemson is so much greater as far as just getting noticed. And we talk about the combine is coming up, and obviously NFL scouts will find you no matter where you play. But make no mistake about it, there's some cachet when you come from a big-time school, and that'll drive you up the draft board. I'm not sure playing for the New York Guardians is going to drive you up the draft board.
Best chance is probably getting suspended for a year. Like, you're a big-time quarterback, you get suspended for the next college football season. You say, screw it. Go to the XFL.
Yeah, those rare cases, and that would be another one. You don't see that happen often, occasionally. But, yeah, you might see every now and again a rare case where somebody will say, okay, I'll spend a year making some money, and then I'll jump to the NFL. But
right.
I don't think you're going to see a tidal wave of that, is my point. I don't think you're going to see a consistent level of players saying, I'm good enough to play in the NFL right now, but I can't, so I'm going to make a little bit of money above board, as opposed to maybe ways you shouldn't and go that direction. I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, there is one player who is in that role right now, and Oliver Luck brought him up. He happens to be a West Virginia guy, Kenny Robinson. He played 2 years at WVU, and then he was dismissed from the team due to a code of conduct violation involving academic fraud. So he was not in school long enough to gain eligibility into the supplemental draft. So he's playing the XFL and then can enter the draft next year. So you might see players that go down that path that say, hey, I got kicked out of school,
right.
Or maybe I don't even, if you're a high school kid, you might choose to go right from high school to the XFL.
And you just mentioned, that's a pretty convoluted path, and that's, I think, the guys that they're talking about. I don't think you're going to see many high school kids, if any at all, who have the opportunity to go to big-time schools are going to choose the XFL over that. Again,
how was the USFL able to do it? What was their kind of way to convince Jim Kelly, Steve Young, Reggie White, Herschel Walker? These were the very best players. Herschel Walker was the best player in college football. He was able to go because they convinced him that you have to wait another year to go to the draft, so come to us early. How are they able to get these level of players to go to their league and I don't want to say compete or make it, but it was a choice for some of these guys.
Yeah, a lot of players, a lot of big-time players played in the USFL because they paid more. And they went down that road, and they decided to compete with the NFL. And I had some big-time ownership groups with a lot of money at their disposal, one who's very well-known today for different reasons. But ultimately, when you pay, and we've talked about it. Secondly, unrestricted free agency hadn't started in the NFL at that point. So salaries weren't what they are today, where it would just be insanity to try to compete with the NFL. The NFL was still vastly underpaying players at that point, and that's where so many, you mentioned some of the big names, but even second tier, I mean, there are so many great players who started in the USFL that people forget about. Sam Mills, who was one of the finalists for the Hall of Fame. Anthony Carter, if you remember him, he started with Michigan. Gary Zimmerman, who's in the Hall of Fame. So many great players started in the USFL in that era because they were paying better.
Yeah. So we don't anticipate then the XFL opening the purse strings is what you're saying. No. They've already said that. They've been, and they can't. I've said it a lot. They budgeted for $350 million. That's what they have for 3 years. So they got to make it through those 3 years. The minute the highest paid quarterbacks in that league, they said they'd go up to $350,000. I don't even know if they have. So that's number one. I think the highest paid player is $250,000. So you start talking about Colin Kaepernick or Johnny Manziel, who went millions and millions and millions of dollars. They're not going to do that, nor should they do that. All right, Johnny Mac, football at 4. Let's get into some NFL stuff, and there's a lot here, so let's get into it. Number one, the Browns announced that defensive end Myles Garrett, he's reinstated by the NFL. Indefinite suspension last October for hitting Mason Rudolph with his own helmet. He missed the final 6 games. Goodell met with him today, convinced that Garrett was contrite. Are you surprised that they cut this back, or was that a fait accompli that this was going to be, once we got to the offseason, people will forget it, and Garrett will be back?
Yeah, you just hit the nail on the head. In essence, that's what it was, a 6-game suspension, and then they used that term indefinite to make it seem worse than it really was. There was no doubt he was going to be cleared for week 1. And you're right. Part of it is that you hope in the off season people forget. But the NFL is the NFL, and people aren't going to forget. So people see through that and see through what went on, but they don't let's be honest, they don't care. So they just go about their business, and they don't care for a reason because they know you're not going to tune out. And until people tune out over issues like this, they're going to continue not to care.
I mean, and it's almost a bad PR move for them to do anything but this. Like, the story has died down, and people don't have the energy to reignite it. And I think,
there's a certain group that always has the energy, and you've already seen that. Granted,
sure,
it's a very small minority, but there's always that minority on social media that's going to complain about everything, no matter what. So you always have that group. I personally think the NFL should be honest. The league obviously doesn't agree with me, and they should say, okay, we're going to suspend this guy for the rest of the season, which is significant. I think you if you explain it to logical people, they'll agree with you and say, look, you lost this, cool. We can't accept this. If it happens again, we'll talk about really, really serious penalties, but be honest. And I think the concern is you're too worried about that vocal group that is just insane, and you're never going to make them happy anyway. So I don't know, and I'm not just putting the NFL in this category. I'm putting every sports league and really businesses outside of sports. You're never going to satiate that group of people. So just be honest with the logical people. But they don't. They feel they have to put together that dog and pony show for whatever reason.
They hide behind the shield. But nonetheless, we move on. So Antonio Brown was acting like an ex in high school after a rough breakup after the junior prom.
Let me tell you about my best friend.
Never realized how good I had it.
That's giving Antonio about 5 years of maturity he probably doesn't have to stay in high school. Look, I think, someone got to this guy and said, yeah, okay,
Well, was it Drew Rosenhaus?
No, you burned every bridge. And I think there's some other things at play. He's clearly got some issues from a standpoint. Who knows? I'm not going to self-diagnose him.
Yeah.
I'm not a psychiatrist, but clearly there's other issues going on. And look, if he wants to play in the NFL again, and he certainly has the talent to do so, there's absolutely no question about that. We talk about a lot of other guys with issues, and whatever they might be, Colin Kaepernick, Johnny Manziel, we don't even know if those guys can play in the NFL. You know Antonio Brown can play at a high level. So he will get an opportunity if he just proves he's got a semblance of sanity. And I think someone's gotten to him and gotten him on the right medication or what have you. And he's trying to turn this thing around, and I hope he does.
Yeah, he. By the way, for the listeners, he sent out a message to Ben Roethlisberger basically saying, man, I never realized how good I had it with you. How, and I don't think there'd be any possibility of the Steelers bringing him back, correct? They wanted him out of there.
No, I think Mike Tomlin threw the biggest party he ever had when he got him out of there. And the essence is, I compare that to way back when Buddy Ryan was here with Chris Carter, and Buddy got killed for letting Chris go. And then for years, he never, to his credit, to Buddy Ryan's credit, he never threw Chris Carter under the bus the entire time. And he got racked through the coals when he turned into a star. And obviously he turned into a Hall of Fame player. And he had a drug problem. And Chris later acknowledged that and said that was the kick in the you-know-what that he needed to clean up his life. So in a lot of ways, Buddy Ryan saved Chris Carter, and hey, maybe it works out that way.
All right, next up, Football at 4, Johnny Max with us. The Colorado Buffaloes, they lost a head coach. They're expected to reach out to Eric Sleeping with Bieniemy for their head coaching vacancy. Is this a smart move for him, or does he stay as the offensive coordinator? What's the better path to a head coaching job, college head coach or NFL offensive coordinator?
Well, I think in his case, NFL offensive coordinator under Andy Reid, I think you got to put that asterisk on there. I think that's closer than college head coach. But he would have the opportunity to do both, and people would still know he was a coordinator under Andy, and then you can kind of prove your leadership skills. So I think it was Mike Lombardi who tweeted out that Bill Walsh quote that said, if you want to be a head coach, go be a head coach. There are no perfect jobs unless you make them perfect. So if Eric wants to prove something, take that job and prove it.
Yeah,
and prove people made a mistake.
Right. It just feels like, if not now, if not already, I should say, then when. But it's a tough decision. He's obviously, like you said, in a good spot. But something else I saw, John, news and notes here around the NFL is, of course, Tom Brady. It's hard to go a Football at 4 segment every day without mentioning him at one point or another, right? And you see social media posts, and everyone has their theories on where Tom Brady could go, if he's going to remain with New England or if he's not. But something interesting that we saw was that the Patriots could avoid basically a $14 million, 13.5 to be exact, cap hit if they can figure out a way to extend his contract before March 18th. And the clock's ticking. Like, that's a month away if they care about $14 million, right?
Yeah, that's the new league year, so there's a lot of contract stipulations that come due at the start of the new league year. A lot of teams have a lot of decisions to make. Ultimately, I've said it a lot. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense from both sides. It's just a question of what does Tom want to do. We talked a lot about LeBron James when he got to free agency again, and there was some talk about the Sixers making a run at him. He had a plan to go to Los Angeles. It's conceived for other reasons that had nothing to do with basketball. I could see Tom thinking that way for other reasons to want to get out to Los Angeles, and vehicles that extend far beyond football. But if it's football, just football, it doesn't make any sense to go anywhere else.
Just Football at 4. That's what we do. We talk football here. Yesterday in a radio interview, Chargers GM Tom Telesco said he likes our internal options to replace Phillip Rivers. They would be Tyrod Taylor and fifth-round pick Easton Stick. He sounds like a good hockey player, but I'm not sure about a starting NFL quarterback. So Tyrod Taylor or one of the many free agents that are available this offseason makes sense for the Chargers.
Taysom.
Well, you could do worse than Tyrod Taylor. I would argue
the playoffs.
That he's one of the better, certainly one of the better backups in the league. I think you can make an argument that he's one of the best 32 quarterbacks in the world, which means he should be a starter somewhere. But I would say, he's probably between 25 and 32. He's at the back end of that group. So I don't think it's great. And then the second thing we always bring up with Tom Brady and the Chargers, well, you got to sell tickets to that $5 billion palace. And that's not an easy market to sell tickets in for the Rams.
I bet you WrestleMania sells it out.
Yeah, it will.
So any quarterbacks at WrestleMania?
Remember, it's a standalone event, so things like that have an easier time selling tickets. You got to go back, play 8 home games every single year. And we know that market. I mean, there's just too much to do. The weather's too nice. If you got a bad football team, people are going to go to the beach and they're going to do other things. They're not going to go spend what it costs. That's the second part. That market is so costly. Everything is so costly. You take a family of 4, you're throwing down $1,000 to get cheap seats when you add in concessions and parking. So it's very difficult, and that's really the only reason I think the Chargers would have any interest in Tom Brady. And Tyrod Taylor, he might help you football-wise. As I said, you could do worse. He's not selling tickets.
All right. ESPN Bucks reporter Jenna Lane reporting their interest in Phillip Rivers is legitimate. She also said they have interest in Tom Brady, Drew Brees, Teddy Bridgewater, and Ryan Tannehill. So what's a better possibility that either –
I'm also, by the way, I'm going to break news here. I'm reporting the Eagles have interest in every receiver available. But then that's it. I love it. Nothing against Jenny, who I know.
Well, she says their interest in Rivers is legitimate, but they've also confirmed interest in Brady, Brees, Bridgewater, Tannehill. So my question is, what's a better possibility that Rivers, Brady, Brees, Bridgewater, or Tannehill are the starting quarterback for the Bucks, or Jameis Winston?
It's a tough decision. It really is. I mean, we talk a lot about age. I say it all the time. I have no idea why you would want to start over with a quarterback in his late 30s or early 40s. So for me, I'm crossing off Rivers, Brees, and Brady from a football perspective. I guess if you think you're a Super Bowl contender and you're a quarterback away, you might at least entertain that type of thing. I don't think the Bucs are in that category. Jameis, we know the ups and downs. He's very frustrating, but he's also very talented. So it comes down. I mean, Bruce Arians has now had a whole year with him. He kind of understands is it going to click with this guy or not? He probably already understands that. He turns the football over so much, and if he decides there's an opportunity it will click, I think they'll bring him back. If he decides he's just too careless, then they got to go in a different direction. But of that group, I don't want the old guys. I never want the old guys.
All right, football at 4, that's all the time we got. A lot of good football stuff. It's all heating up. Free agency, the draft. It'll be right here on 97.3 ESPN. Follow him at JF McMullen. Eagles have been really quiet the last day.
A little bit too quiet.
They've been quiet for a couple of days. Well, we haven't even talked. We have to talk about Jeremiah Washburn being the director of player personnel and assistant coach. That is wacky.
I thought we did talk. I didn't know about it until you said it the last time we did talk. We did bring that up.
Yeah, I mean that's one of those things because he's essentially in Andy Weil's position when Joe Douglas was here. He's second in command.
It'd be like if Joe Douglas was like the offensive line coach.
Exactly. It would be like if Andy Weidel, when Joe was here, was also helping coach the defensive line. That's in essence what's going on, which is wacky.
All right, at JF McMullen, Football at 4 is back tomorrow with more NFL conversation along the way, and we're getting closer to Week 2 in the XFL. Check out our interview with Oliver Luck from earlier if you missed it, and of course, John McMullen, like all guests, appeared to be
by the way, I told Josh I put the over/under on WVU references at 45.
It was under.
Well, I had it at 2.5.
I think we had like 38, but all right, pal, we'll talk tomorrow.
All right, see.
John McMullen, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda Hotline.